Hello and welcome to a special bonus episode of Control-Alt-Lead. I'm Tom Allen, editor of Computing, and I'm joined today by Katia Gil Guzman, who is a founding member of the developer experience team at OpenAI and represents the team in Europe. We've got a great conversation lined up all about AI safety, AI agents, and the use of AI in coding. So Katia, hi, thank you so much for joining me today. I'd like to hand it over to you to talk a little bit about your role and what that entails.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks for having me. Yeah, so I've been at OpenAI for 2 years now, and as part of the developer experience team, my job is really to make sure all developers using OpenAI technology can be as successful as possible. And so it used to be only about the API and using our models, but now it's much more than that because we have a lot of products that are developer facing. We have Codex, our coding agent. We now have the Apps SDK to build for ChatGPT. So my role is really to help any developer that can build on OpenAI or with OpenAI. And as part of also the European team, I kind of represent the European developers. So I work a lot with the product teams that are in the US, and I share feedback. I help with the launches, and I make sure the developers' voices in Europe gets heard.
Fantastic. So AI coding obviously is probably the big topic for developers in
Yes.
2025. And we've seen really big adoption, very fast adoption. It's become known as vibe coding. You just tell AI roughly what you want it to do and use the output. But there are a lot of questions that remain about, for example, trust in that output. So what strategies can developers use today to validate AI-generated code for accuracy and security?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, I don't like to talk about vibe coding as, what you can do with Codex with our coding agent because I agree that vibe coding, there's a lot of unknown that comes with it. So when we talk about vibe coding in general, we mean, just trusting an AI's code output and uh looking at what the end result looks like and just accepting and that's why it's called vibe coding because you're not really understanding what's happening behind the scenes. You're just seeing the output and you just go, okay, that looks great, and you go on for a while, and at some point, you can get somewhat far, but at some point you might run into trouble. And I would say vibe coding is not really scalable, so that's why I don't recommend to people that they vibe code, because it's great for side projects. It's great for a lot of things, but for production software, vibe coding isn't what I would recommend doing. And so the way we think about it, coding agents like Codex, they're really an AI software engineer. So they're not vibe coding. They're not helping you vibe code. They're like an AI teammate that you onboard on your team. And so it makes all the difference because, if you onboard new people on your team, you're going to give them some context about what you do. You're going to give them some tasks, but then you're always going to check what they're doing, right? So the way it works is you can work with Codex in a lot of different environments. You can, you can work with it in your terminal. You can work with it in your code editor, but you can also work with it in the cloud. And ultimately, what you get is a PR, a pull request. So it's a list of changes that the AI agent, the coding agent, did. But then you're still responsible for accepting it, for reviewing it, and then merging it into your code base. And so it's really no different from working with humans and having, a set of changes that you need to decide whether you want to merge them or not. So that's, I guess, what is different about just vibe coding and trusting an AI to do anything. It's really like working on a project with a lot of different teammates, and some of them might do great work, but some of them might need a little bit more context and might need some additional verification. So yeah, I would say just review everything and then you can make sure that it's high quality.
Okay, and these AI coding agents like Codex, they help you review everything by providing that documentation and change list of what they've done.
Yeah, yeah. So they commit changes, and it's in the form of you can then open pull request and really see side by side, okay, these are the changes that the AI agent did, and you can decide to accept them. You can also iterate, so you can say, okay, I don't want this thing, can you please change it? So it's really a standard way of reviewing code, and as I was saying, it's like the exact same way you would work with a human coworker. So that's how you can tell really right away, what's changed. And another cool thing you can do with Codex is you can have it review your pull request as well. So whether Codex actually wrote the code or you wrote the code or someone else wrote the code, you can also trigger code reviews. And what this will do is actually check independently for, you know, um, other issues that might arise from the changes that you made. Because when you're working on a piece of the code, you're focusing on the current thing, but you might not think about all of the dependencies or all of the things that will be affected by your changes. And so if you use code review, which is your new Codex feature, you can get all of that additional, you can get those additional checks, and you can see, okay, what I did here, it might actually affect this other part of the code that I did not think about. And so that's a way also to mitigate risk.
Okay. So sticking with that mitigating risk sort of topic, AI coding in enterprise tools, which obviously a lot of the people that are listening to this will be familiar with, there are high requirements for code, enterprise code, on compliance, on regulation, on security, lots of laws for people to follow. How trustworthy is enterprise code in those situations?
Do you mean Codex?
Sorry, AI code and yeah,
Yeah,
codecs.
yeah. Well, actually, we have ways to steer coding agents like Codex in the right direction. So, for example, one thing you can do is have an agents.md file. It's a new standard that a lot of coding agents have adopted, actually, not just Codex, but it's a sort of documentation for the AI agent, because in your code base you have documentation for humans. The AI agent can also understand that, but you can have additional rules that are automatically loaded every time the coding agent is going to do something. And so in those rules, you can be very specific about, your code, your coding style, or you can be very specific about things that the agent should absolutely not do. You can say, don't touch that folder, or don't never use this library, or anything else that you would say to, again, a coworker just onboarding on your project. And so the AI agent has been trained to respect those rules. So it's really good at just taking in all of your requirements and using that as guidance when it's coding new things. And again, you can always verify, and you can always change or decide not to accept something if it's actually used something that it shouldn't have. So that's a way you can make sure the coding agent goes in the right direction. And also, one thing that we've heard people like doing is, every time the agent does something that it shouldn't, you can ask it, okay, please edit this file, the agents.md file, to add a rule not to do this in the future. And so you kind of, yeah, iterate once you start working with it and you understand how it works. You can also ask it to kind of self-improve by adding those additional rules.
Okay, so a sort of way of blacklisting changes that it makes and making sure it doesn't make those again. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
exactly.
You described Codex and similar tools as a sort of AI developer.
Yeah.
So I think a big question on people's minds is going to be, are these going to replace my developers? Is it going to put my team out of work? I'd just really be interested in what you have to say about that.
Yeah, of course. And that's a valid concern, right? Like, it's able to write code much faster and most of the time much better than humans are writing code. But I think the way we should think about it is, it's actually giving us time back and just changing the software engineer over. So just to give you an example, and we actually heard from a lot of people yesterday. We had a meetup about Codex in Paris, and what everybody's saying is, I can do just so much more as a software engineer than I could before. But instead of writing code manually, instead of doing all of the tedious tasks that you normally have to do as a software engineer, you can just focus on um, thinking about the solution, talking to the product team, and just describing what you want, and thinking about the right architecture for your solution. So you become more of a tech lead than a software engineer that's just writing code, right? Like, so your role changes, and you're also able to output much more than if you were doing all of that manually. So just to give you an example, we at OpenAI, almost all of our engineers and technical stuff use Codex. And we've seen internally that the number of pull requests merged per week is 70% higher than if you don't use Codex. And when I say merge, it's important because it means it's the pull requests that were actually high quality and that ended up in the product. So that means we're just building so much faster than we were before without Codex. We still have a lot of engineers, but instead of working on one project and doing that in 3 weeks, maybe they can complete it in 3 days and just do so much more. So, and we can actually see it. Like, I don't know if you followed the latest launches from the last month, but we can see a clear change in how fast things are shipping internally. Just even with the Codex product, we shipped two different models 1 week apart. We and if you look at the changelog, there are new features coming out every week, and I think that wouldn't be possible if Codex wasn't here to help. So
Hmm.
it's really changing the way developers work, and we're just building more, building better, and being more efficient. We still need engineers to tell Codex what to do. But instead of being kind of doing all of the small, little things that are honestly, as a software engineer, I find them annoying. Maybe some people love it, but personally, I don't like spending my time just writing repetitive code or doing some refactoring. I'd rather an AI agent do that, and I'd rather focus on the creative part and thinking about what to build, how to build it, and just changing the way I work to explain to my new AI teammates what they should do to make it happen.
Okay. One more question on AI coding before we move on to the agent side of things, which we've touched on a little bit, but I'm going to expand on it. But on the coding front, a lot of IT leaders I've talked to have talked about, they've stressed the importance of documentation when you're introducing AI coding. So, these autonomous AI, AI tools follow the documentation, but documentation at the moment is often like left behind. It's the last thought, it's the last thing people do. How would you recommend that change? Like how can we make sure that developers prioritize documentation to help these AI coding tools be the best they can be?
Yeah, so I think there are two types of documentation, right? There is documentation for humans and documentation for AI agents. And as I mentioned, AI agents, coding agents, they can read the documentation for humans, but they also don't necessarily need the same format. They can understand it, but there's also things that are specific for coding agent, like agents.md. You can tell the agent, please look at this thing, use this tool to be able to find this information. And that's something you wouldn't necessarily need if you were only, if only humans were working on your code base. Another thing is, sometimes for humans, you might need a lot more context to explain the code, to explain what it does, whereas the coding agent, it can read that, it can read the code. It doesn't need explaining. It doesn't need that much explanation because it does have all of the code in context all the time. So in on one side you may need to specify a little bit more about how to use the tools the coding agent has at its disposal. For example, there are some we now support MCP tools for Codex, so you can tell Codex, okay, when you need to do this, please use this MCP tool to connect to a linear our ticketing system to be able to update the tickets that you do, or please use this context 7 MCP server to get up to date documentation. So that's something that's specific to the coding agent. But on the other side, you don't need to explain the code. You just need to explain the intent and how to think about building new features in general. And that's something that you can do in natural language. It's just you have to think about it from a coding agent point of view. Like, what would be helpful for the coding agent to know?
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for that, Katia. Okay, so agents. Agents are very much the next big thing in artificial intelligence, but I think for the last 12 months or so, we've seen quite a bit of, let's call it agent washing. A lot of people are describing what they're doing as agents, even though it's really just some autonomous system or basic machine learning. So how does OpenAI define an AI agent, and how are you going to make that the industry standard way of defining one?
Yeah. So actually, I think I agree. Everyone's talking about agents. Sometimes it's a little confusing what it is. For us, there's a simple definition. So at least for me, and I think that's, the kind of what we say very often when we talk about an agent. So an agent, the way I would define it is an AI system that has instructions, tools, and guardrails. So that means it has a sort of it has guidelines on how it should behave, and it has tools to allow it to take action. And so the tools, you can either access external services, you can access data, you can access anything that can help you accomplish a task. And the guardrails are a way to make sure the agent doesn't, you know, behaves as you want it to behave. And so guardrails can be things like don't reply to a certain type of question, or, if a user is asking something that they shouldn't, you should steer them in the right direction, things like that. So I would say it's as simple as that. An agent is just an AI system that does that. So you have the model, which is the actual, the large language model that allows uh, to think about all of that, and then the tools and the guardrails, and all of that combined, that's your agent. And then you can also have what we call networks of agents, so multiple agents working together, and you can orchestrate them to accomplish harder tasks. Honestly, most of the time you don't even need that. I know it's kind of in vogue to do networks of agent, but I think most of the time you just need a model that has access to tools and some guardrails, and that's it.
Okay, that's interesting, because I was going to ask you about multi-agent orchestration, because that is definitely the next big thing. It's what a lot of people are talking about. Uh, and well, my original plan was to ask you, when is that going to be technically feasible? But you're saying that it doesn't need to be, and single autonomous agents are capable of doing most of the work you need to do.
It really depends on your use case. So I think most of the time, for most use cases that are fairly simple, you don't need to do multi-agent orchestration. You can, and it's actually very easily feasible. For example, we have the Agents SDK, which is uh, our SDK to be able to build agents and network of agents that can hand off to each other very easily. You can also use now our agent kit, which is our new visual agent builder, to do all of that orchestration. And it's all built in. It's very simple to put together this network of agents with these tools. I think most of the time it's a little bit overkill to do a network of agents unless you have a very clear separation of concerns. You have multiple tools needed that can sometimes interfere. So the way I think about it is, if you have a use case with multiple, you know, multiple groups of sub use cases, and for each of those sub use cases, you have many tools that you need to use. And if you don't separate them, the agent might mix them up. So in that case, you might want to have some overarching orchestrator agent that then redirects to the right one. And then when we use a tool and we're in the right sub use case, then there's no confusion. So that's where you would want to do a network of agent. Otherwise, you can do it. It's just you don't need to. And sometimes having just one agent with 10 tools works very well. So it really depends on your use case.
Okay, great. That's really interesting. Thanks for the answer. I'd like to pivot now to just a slightly wider topic around AI and generative AI. A lot of the use cases that we've seen, the proof of concepts, the pilot rollouts, the really successful ones are when companies have invested time, effort, and money in training their staff to ensure these generative AI rollouts, AI coding tools, things like that are effective. I wonder if you have any advice for people going down that route, what OpenAI recommends, or any tools that people can use to make the most of Gen AI tools.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point because we've seen, actually the best success stories we've seen is when companies are not just introducing an AI tool and just saying, okay, here it is, use it. They're actively training their staff and actively like kind of rebuilding even from almost from scratch to incorporate AI tools everywhere. Because if it's just seen as an some tool that you have access to but you don't really need, you don't know that you need it and you don't know how to use it, it's not going to change anything. What we've seen is, for example, the actually I have since I'm in Paris, and I was just talking about this at the meetup yesterday. We are partnering with a French business schools, and what they did is they introduced ChatGPT for 1,000 of their users, and they didn't just said, okay, now you have access to it. They did a whole program where the point for a month was to find every use case possible, was to think about how to use it, and now they're one of our best users in education because they did that work of really uh you know not pausing everything but just saying, okay, now we have this, let's think together about all of the use cases that we can do. And Moderna is also a great example of that, where they did like internal hackathons. They came up with, I don't know the number, but 200 or 300 use cases that they could use ChatGPT for. And that's a great example of how you actually introduce AI in your company. You're not just saying, okay, now we have access to it. You're actually actively asking people to try and find use cases. And once they have it, then usually they realize how much more efficient they can get, how powerful it can be for their organization. So we're really trying to push people to say, okay, it's not just not signing up for it won't change anything. You need to actually actively adopt it. And what we've seen also is that when the leadership team uses it, there's much more adoption across the organization because you can't ask people in your organization to use it if you are not the first users. And the best way to learn about it is to actually start using it for yourself, for your own use cases. And that's when you can kind of understand the power of it and how much more you can get done with AI.
Great. We're running a little bit short on time here, so I've just got two more questions I really want to ask you.
Yeah.
The first is, we've seen quite a lot of companies recently putting out AI browsers, so things like Comet or OpenAI's Atlas. But these things, they merge the control plane and the data plane. So I would say that they introduce a bit of a security hole for people who don't understand quite how to use them. What's your advice for businesses and IT leaders who want to experiment with these new tools, but also maintain safety?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, Atlas. So for those who don't know, it's our new browser that came out, I think, less than a month ago. It's very recent, and it's like ChatGPT is embedded in your browser and is next to you for everything that you're trying to do. And I totally agree. There are some risks with letting AI agent kind of drive what you're doing. We've done a lot of work around security for Atlas. So we've done, thousands of hours of red teaming to make sure that the agent doesn't do anything that can be, that can be unsafe. But of course, you know, things are evolving. We can't guarantee that it will be safe for every possible use case that, malicious actors might come up with. What I would say is, um, you can't, if you have very highly sensitive tasks that you don't want an AI agent to do, then don't ask the AI agent to do it. But for a lot of tasks that are actually, when you think about it, pretty low risk, and even if you're an enterprise that works with sensitive data, there's always some things that you can automate that are low risk. So when you think about if you think about a matrix with, like, on one side you have risk and on the other side you have value. If you have things that are super high risk, then you don't necessarily want an AI agent to handle it. But if it's like lower risk, but then the value is also huge, you might want to decide where you put the cursor and where you want to get more value by letting an AI automate it. So it's really up to you to decide where you're comfortable with. Atlas, you also decide, you can specify what you wanted to access and what you wanted to do. And if you're not logged in or anything, it can't log in for you. So it's just up to each organization to decide what level of risk they're comfortable with, and gradually, do some tests with the tasks that are low risk at first, and then gradually grant access to more things as they feel more comfortable um with how the agent is behaving, and how well it sticks to the guidelines.
Lovely. Okay. So, start slow and then roll it out from there.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. My final question for you, Katia, and I really appreciate you taking as much time as you have already. Unfortunately, this is a very big question.
No
I'm
worries.
going to ask you your predictions for the next 12 to 24 months on the future of the AI sector. Any trends that you see coming up, use cases, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. I'd love to know the opinion of someone who's really at the sharp end of AI.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say I appreciate that you said 12 to 24 months, because I feel like, a couple years ago, people would ask me, what do you think will happen in the next 5 years? And I can't answer that question. It's impossible to say. For the next 12 months, I would say one thing that is interesting is, so I don't know if you saw, but we launched the Apps SDK at Dev Day early October, and this is a new way for developers to build apps for ChatGPT. So I think, and it's not for ChatGPT specifically. It's a new standard built on the Model Context Protocol. So this is an open standard, and the idea is that any client like ChatGPT, but others could also do it, could adopt this new standard and show interfaces. So visual interfaces inside their client, so that users can interact with external apps directly from those clients. So we're doing it in ChatGPT. Maybe, hopefully, others will adopt it too, so that developers can build just once and expand to any compatible client. But I think this is gonna really change the way we interact with different apps, different tools, because now we're starting to see a trend where people want to be able to do anything from one interface. So, and it's already starting with ChatGPT and others, where you can connect your emails, you can connect any tools that have an MCP server accessible. So like your systems that have those tools exposed, you can just bring that inside ChatGPT and say, okay, now instead of going to that external app, I can bring everything together in one place, and it can all work together. So that's the interesting part, is you can switch from your emails to your CRM to anything inside the same conversation that that keeps that same context. So I think that's really interesting. And with the apps SDK and with the bringing real visual interfaces in addition to those tools, you can do even more. So that means you can be in one conversation, you can have some context about your preferences and do a lot like booking your next trip, or like buying things or doing whatever you want inside the same conversation. So I think that's going to change a lot how people interact with different apps. Another thing that's more like for the 24 month is I think interfaces as we know them will really change. So right now, we're used to going on a website and it's the same for everyone, and we adapt to the website. So if we want to see, I don't know, if you're on an e-commerce website, you have to apply your filters, or if you're booking something, same thing. Like, and the website is not going to adapt to you. You have to bring in your contexts and you have to say exactly what you want, and maybe you need to click on 10 different things before you get what you came here for. And so I think in the future, we're going to see a lot more personalization. We're going to see a lot more a way to bring in your own context with you, so that when you go on a website, you don't need to adapt. The website will adapt to you. So we have this, we've seen a lot of people talk about generative UI. And so that's when, instead of having a static UI based on what the users say, you will generate the UI kind of on the fly. So I think that we'll see is something that will start to happen even more, and we'll see more websites that actually have personalization built in, and where you can bring in your context instead of having to adapt to the website. So I'm really excited about how all of this is going to evolve, and I think it's going to be much better for end users.
That is such an interesting prospect of generative UI. That's not one I've come across before, but I'm definitely going to go and look it up after this recording. So thank you so much, Katia. Thank you for joining me today. I
Yeah, of
really,
course.
really appreciated that insight into the AI sphere.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and yeah, hopefully your listeners will learn something, and happy to answer any questions that they might have if they want to learn more.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Kasia. I also have to give thanks to our steering committee of CIOs at Computing, who sent in a lot of their own questions that I was able to pass on to you, Kasia. So thank you to our steering committee. And our audience, please be on the lookout for our last episode of the year coming up on the 1st of December. Sticking with the AI theme, I'm talking to Alexandra Ebert, who is the Chief AI and Democratization Officer at Mostly AI, all about the current AI market. So be on the lookout for that one. Until then, you can always head over to computing.co.uk for more research, news, and analysis. See you soon.